everybody, George Soto here, and thanks so much for joining us for this GTM Pack podcast episode with my friend Tim. How are you, brother? It's been a while.
I'm doing great, George. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Why don't you just take a quick second, just give us kind of a couple second intro on yourself, your background, and your company.
Yeah, happy to. So I'm Tim, CEO and co-founder of a company called Correlated. We specialize in helping sales teams find revenue opportunities from within their own data from people who are using their product or on their website, and try and identify intent signals. My background's in sales and go-to-market. I've been doing that for my entire career, predominantly in startups. Usually been the first kind of salesperson hired at zero revenue several times, and helped figure out those initial playbooks and figure out what works. And so I started this company based on a passion for that, and realizing there was sort of a gap based on my own experience at a prior company where I used kind of these types of signals to start to build out the go-to-market motion. So yeah, happy to chat more about what we're seeing at Correlated with our customers and go-to-market in 2023.
Yeah, well, let's dig into go-to-market 2023 here. The last year, maybe a little more than that, has been quite an adventure for a lot of us across the board, right? Whether you're in the SaaS space and startups, or you started to see it just broadly across bigger companies as well. If you're a sales leader right now, you're probably struggling getting organizations to buy. CFOs are now making decisions, which is scary, right? And I get it, right? We get it quantitatively, right? How should I start to approach this? And then how does this also tie into what you're seeing Correlated? Because, frankly, you're an innovator and an early leader in this new category around product-led growth technologies, right? What advice, would you give these sales leaders out there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, maybe I can start with some good news and then I'll go into more tactical stuff. So I think good news is just based on, sort of our data, what we're seeing with our customers, and kind of other things that we're hearing kind of more subjectively. It does seem like the market is improving right now. And so there's been some data coming out on sort of IT spending trends, which seem to be going in the right direction. Earnings are happening right now, and some of the trends there for a lot of the companies that are in kind of B2B and in cloud, think about like Google, Amazon, Azure, Microsoft Azure, those are looking a little better than maybe expected, or not as awful. So I think, overall Q4 last year into Q1 of this year was really tight and really tough. And I think there was a lot of challenges, but now things seem to be improving. So that's the good news. I think the bad news is, as you mentioned, there's still a really challenging environment when compared to, say, 2020 or 2021, when it seemed like everyone was just buying things without, any process, left and right. And so, as you mentioned, kind of the CFO is now, really involved in a lot of decisions. There have been, efforts on the part of many companies to cut costs and sort of reduce footprint of spend across different products, different categories, maybe consolidate spend. And so my recommendation would be, the thing that everyone should be doing no matter what in any environment, but is especially important today, is, are you really solving a pain? And then can that pain be tied to either saving a lot of money, or can it be tied to making money? So I think those are the two kind of key areas that I'd focus on, and hopefully kind of the product that you're selling, you're having your team sell, can solve one of those two big problems.
Tim, isn't this like going back to the basics in many ways, right? Like there was this, crazy market that happened, but we've been, and I know we've known each other for a long time. We've been through, I guess there's been a couple of these down markets, and but to me, when I hear, really getting focused on, are you solving a problem, getting focused on these value propositions around saving money or being more efficient. For me, when I've heard this, and I've heard this a lot now, talking to leaders out there, I go, we sort of lost sight of the fundamentals for a long time. And in the another sort of positive angle on this is that now it's really forcing us to sit down not be lazy salespeople, right? Not be just the glad handing, hey, how's it going? I'm the cool, person in the room. Like, I really need to be on top of shit. I can't be a sucky, lazy salesperson who doesn't prepare.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. And, selfishly, part of our value prop is enabling sales teams to have, ammunition from that standpoint. So are there intent triggers? Are there signals that you can use to then make a case and go in and use those sort of signals and intent triggers to then say, hey, well, this is clearly an indication of interest, and I'm going to use that in my communication, use it to personalize how I go in and talk to customers and all that. And we do that through use of product data, behavioral data. So we can go into more detail on our stuff, but just at a high level, building a case, around your product, building that business case, using that, whether it's all the way from a prospecting, just a cold email, and trying to personalize that email and build a case starting there when no one's ever heard of you, all the way through, when you're in a sales process, maybe you have a champion that's, excited, but they need to convince other people that have no idea what you do. And so you really have to, work a little bit harder to make it happen.
Let's dive into Correlated here a bit. And the reason why I think it's, super important now, not only because I want to promote my friend's product, but I think it's super relevant to this conversation and where we're at right now. We've been talking about product-led growth, at least me now, like in this context and the category where you have solutions that have been invested in by the venture community, and this whole category's now been fueled. We've been talking about it for now a couple of years. And, one of the things that I think is really important to point out is how to approach, like right now, if you're going to cut 50% of your company, if you're going to cut, 50, 60, 70, 80, et cetera, percent of your sales team, right? Start to look, and we've been talking about this, start to look for more efficient channels. How do we approach now product-led growth from this lens in this environment? Because, 2 years ago, we were having a lot of fun, but now it's like, oh, hold on, I got to be more efficient, right? And how do we tie that into also not abandoning the old, I don't want to say old, but the like our traditional motion, channels or playbook, but augmenting it or bringing these two worlds together to now be more efficient?
It's a great question. So I'll kind of take a couple of those questions and try and knock them down. So I think, for product-led growth, essentially what that means is the sort of easy definition, if anyone listening kind of is still unclear. Basically, can you distribute your product in a way where an end user, kind of an individual, can start using it without any impediments? So they can just sign up, start using it, for free or with a credit card or whatever. But the main kind of idea is that they don't have to, quote unquote, talk to sales or fill out a long form and then wait to get access. They're just kind of in the product. And so some examples, things like Zoom, for example, is a good one, or Slack or Calendly for booking meetings. So there's a ton of different examples of products like that. The benefit for sales teams of working for a company that has that kind of distribution is there are a few things. One, you're going to get a ton of top of the funnel leads, essentially. And so that's good and bad, because if you get a lot of leads and not all of them are useful, then you might waste time on the ones that aren't kind of the right fit for you to talk to from a sales standpoint. But that then kind of leads into what we do and how we help, which is basically, okay, let's say you do have that good, top of funnel, that sort of large amount of leads. Where this really helps salespeople is identifying, okay, let's pick through that 10,000, 20,000 signups per month. Let's find the top 100 or 200 or whatever it might be, that are really showing signs of intent and showing signs of being ready to take that step of upgrading from free to paid, or from paying on a credit card to going to an invoice. Can we identify those signals of intent and then arm the sales team with A, just being aware of who to talk to, and then B, what are the reasons why I should talk to them? What can my playbook be? What can my next best action be to go after it? So for a salesperson, that's hugely valuable, because they're kind of being handed kind of the play and what to do, and they're being handed like basically a very warm lead, a very, very hot lead.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how we help, and the benefit, I think, for what we do. And then from an efficiency standpoint, at least where we come in is, you're able to use our product and the automation that we enable to run some of these plays on autopilot. So instead of a salesperson or a big team of people having to manually sift through all this data, all these signals to find kind of these best potential accounts, these best leads, we just kind of drip them out to you in notifications, alerts in Slack, or update, your CRM, kind of get your lead list built out for you. And you're just kind of able to work it, every given day that you're seeing kind of these hot leads come in, you're able to kind of get to work and tackle them. So it takes a ton of sort of that manual effort out of the hands of a bigger team that might have to be sifting through things, and makes it so that just a few people can do the job that maybe once was done by many. So those are some of the things that we do to help, and happy to dive in more.
Yeah, I can't help but to think about these product-led motions or as real channels, right? And so, yeah, you still have, in my opinion, still have the form, on your website, but have now a CTA to sign up to the product. I mean, because you may just, as a prospect, want to just talk to someone, right? And that's okay.
Sure. Tons of our customers and companies we work with, they'll have multiple ways for a buyer to engage, and I would always recommend having a fast track or talk to sales kind of motion where maybe you don't want to play around with the product first. Maybe you just say, hey, we kind of know what Miro does. We want to buy team whiteboarding software, and we're kind of sold on that idea, and we don't need to play around with Miro for a month first. We're just going to do it. And so can we talk about that? So I think there's plenty of rationale to having kind of that on the website, and making sure you have kind of routing set up so that the sales team can get in touch with those folks as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and that being that more traditional, but I think the way that I was always sort of like trained was have one CTA on the website and drive everybody. And I don't know that that's true anymore. I think it's, having that optionality, having a menu of options. And I think the product-led growth motion there is still super valuable, because in the situation where it's, you mentioned Miro, right? Where, the prospect goes to the website, wants to talk to sales, buys it, but now is in the product using it. And now it's like further down in the journey. I can start to listen to intent for land and expand and, expansion deals, right? And those sort of things. So that's one of the things that I love so much about your technology and this category. It's just like, it's not just top of the funnel. I know we've talked a lot about top of the funnel, but it's really like CS, right? There's so many possibilities, which I think is super, super strategic. So for those CROs out there, revenue organizations that are thinking about this, like I highly recommend, adding this type of functionality. And in my opinion, one last thing I want to say was like, it could be product tours, right? There's a lot of those solutions out there. One that I worked with in the past, and there's a huge category around there. But some organizations, you might have some product tours for certain features, but then, the prospect actually wants to get into the product, right? And so, as we've talked about it a lot, and so I think like having that menu of multiple doors to enter the house is the future, and then seeing what really sticks. I was on a webinar several months ago with the folks at Pendo, and check out Pendo, like their approach to this world. I know it's, their technology helps facilitate this stuff, is so interesting, because they talk, Tim, really about that, right? Having multiple options, giving that optionality to prospects to enter the door. So
they have a great product, and I think to your point around expansion. Speaking of webinars, we actually have one next week with our customer Intercom, where we're going to talk about how they power expansion plays with Correlated. And I think you're absolutely right. It's not just about kind of that new business sales motion, or the top of the funnel trying to find, that new deal, that new logo, although that can be part of it, but it's also about, okay, you have some subset of customers that are already spending money. Maybe it's on a credit card or it's on an invoice, but they can spend more. And if you proactively reach out to them to drive cross-sell of new products or to drive an upgrade of the current plan to a better plan, and there are ways that we can help identify those signals that would indicate accounts are ready for that, then being proactive is going to lead to more revenue, faster revenue, and it's going to drive up your net dollar retention. And that's a core metric that everyone's trying to hold the line on at the very least, and ideally do even better on if possible.
Awesome. Well, Tim, thank you so much, for really digging into this. In kind of conclusion here as we wrap up, let's talk a little bit about the founder journey right now, what that's like. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs who listen to this podcast, and we're really trying to figure out, how do we navigate the waters as a founder in this environment today? What's the journey been like here? And any, like, if you have like a tip or so that comes to mind that you would tell entrepreneurs out there, let's say particularly CEOs who are getting into the game right now, any tips?
Yeah. I mean, I think, the environment in 2020 and 2021 was so atypical that, maybe some bad lessons were learned, and I'm no different here. I think one of the things that was sort of bad about that time frame was that there were a lot of activities that CEOs, founders were doing that weren't related to building the product, selling the product, talking to customers, hiring great people. There were a lot of sort of things that people did that were outside of those core functions. And I think, really, if you're starting a company or you've maybe raised a little money or you're early, the best things you can do are be, talking to customers, trying to learn as quickly as possible, showing, prospective customers early mock-ups and wireframes before you even build anything, trying to get as much validation of whether what you're trying to build and the problem you're trying to solve is actually a really big pain point. The more you can spend, your time doing that versus other things, I think the better. And I would say this environment really lends itself to that kind of focus, because it's tougher out there, and so there's less easy venture rounds going unless you're in AI, but that's a different topic for a different day. So you really have to focus on driving that value. So that'd be my one tip. Spend as much time as you can talking to customers and thinking about what you will build to solve those problems you're trying to solve.
And I wanted to wrap up with this idea, just mapping back to what you do with Correlated and the PLS, product-led sales, product-led growth, PLG. There's a lot of acronyms these days. If you think about marketing, like as salespeople, I'm a former salesperson, I still, am diving back in my way these days. We would get a bunch of like webinar signups, and I remember marketing would send those over, and I'm like, I don't have any intent here. Like maybe they signed up to a webinar, etc. I think as sales and marketing leaders today, think about, don't abandon the webinars, right? There's a purpose, there's a certain context around it. But imagine if we're starting to really market to these product-led channels and getting them in there. I mean, you're gonna get the ultimate intent data. So just one thing to think about is, if I'm thinking about my marketing mix in the various plays, it's like, I have my webinars that have that context when folks sign up. Maybe it's a lot, further up the funnel, or maybe not, but it's a different world or a package of intent data. And then you have the product-led channels, right? And I really think that folks should start to think about that. And I think you'll be surprised at the rates that the product-led intent data converts at versus the other ones, and start to figure it out, right? Every organization is different, and every brand has a different way that prospects interact with it. So I just wanted to end with that because that came to mind. I forgot to mention it earlier as you were kind of explaining your world.
I think that's great advice. And, I don't have too much to add there, except, try and find, if you have a great product that is possible for people to just sign up for and get the value on, like you should be promoting that, starting from that, and then seeing how you can kind of develop that pipeline from there and find the intent from within. those very, high excited and high intent product users. That would be a recommendation I'd have. And it's not a replacement for other marketing activities, but it's something you should definitely lean into if you have a fantastic.
Awesome. Tim, thank you so much, brother. Have a great afternoon. And I'm sure if folks want to follow you on social media or maybe connect, learn more about Correlated, LinkedIn's probably the best, I'm going to guess.
Tim Geisenheimer on LinkedIn or T Geisenheimer on Twitter. And shoot me an email, tim@correlated.com if you want to learn more about what we're up to.
Awesome. Well, have a great day.
Thanks, George.